very warm welcome. You're watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Let's get started. Our top story tonight on Gravitas is about Russia's new missile, the one that Russia launched into Ukraine, a weapon that President Vladimir Putin labels as experimental. Is this missile a game changer? We tell you what is known so far, what has Ukraine said, and why the launch of this missile could be a turning point in the Russia-Ukraine war. And here's a look at what else is lined up for you on the show tonight. BAP's Hindu Mandir in Abu Dhabi has now been named MENA's best cultural project of 2024. We get you the complete story. As Delhi grapples with the pollution nightmare, we tell you about shocking data that reveals that 5 trees are chopped every hour in the national capital. All this and more coming up. Tonight on Gravitas, our top story is about Russia. It's about Russia's new ballistic missile. They are calling it the Oreshnik. On Thursday, Russia launched a nuclear-capable ballistic missile into Ukraine, a weapon that the Pentagon has called experimental. It was launched by Russia not just as a response to Ukraine's NATO-backed long-range strikes. You see, it was also a message, a warning to the West. Initially, Ukraine claimed that Russia had fired an intercontinental ballistic missile, or ICBM, which would basically mean an unprecedented escalation. However, Putin has now clarified that the missile was an experimental, nuclear-capable, hypersonic ballistic missile. So what exactly is this new Russian missile all about? Why did Ukraine initially, in a way, jump the gun and call it an ICBM? The Pentagon has said that it was informed of the strike beforehand. So why didn't it act to de-escalate is the immediate question. Also, is the United States, as Russia claims, deliberately fueling a global war? You see, after an entire day of confusion over Ukraine's claims that Russia fired an ICBM, the Russian president himself delivered a televised address from the Kremlin. And he put all confusion to rest, revealing that Russia had deployed a new hypersonic missile system in a strike on Ukrainian territory. In fact, he criticized the United States for escalating tensions, reiterated Russia's willingness to engage in peace talks, and blamed Washington for making the conflict global. Listen in.
Еще раз хочу особо подчеркнуть,
in response to the use of American and British long-range weapons on November the 21st of this year, the Russian armed forces launched a combined attack on one of the facilities of the Ukrainian defense industry complex. In combat conditions, one of the newest Russian medium-range missile systems was also tested, in this case with a ballistic missile in non-nuclear hypersonic equipment. Our missile men called it Oreshnik. The tests were successful. The goal of the launch was achieved.
Vladimir Putin's address came after Ukraine struck Russia's pre-2014 borders using Western-made long-range missiles. Russia calls this a significant escalation of the conflict. Now, here's what we know about this missile and why it is not a match for the American ATACMS and the British Frankostorm Shadow missiles. Like we said, it's called Oreshnik. Putin has said it is a hypersonic ballistic missile. He said it traveled at 10 times the speed of sound and so it could not be intercepted. According to reports, in fact, it has a range of 5,000 kilometers, that's 3,100 miles, which basically means it has a range allowing Russia to strike most of Europe and the west coast of the United States of America. It appears to have multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles, which means separate warheads able to hit different targets. The missile is part of Russia's new generation of medium-range weapons. According to Putin, no existing air or missile defense systems, including those deployed by the United States in Europe, are capable of intercepting the Oreshnik. Experts say it could carry 6 to 8 conventional or nuclear warheads and was probably already in service. The Pentagon said the missile that Russia fired was based on the RS-26 Rubez intercontinental ballistic missile. Now, the Pentagon said the U.S. had been notified of the launch through nuclear risk reduction channels.
Did launch an experimental intermediate range ballistic missile. This IRBM was based on Russia's RS-26 Rubez intercontinental ballistic missile model. In terms of notifications to the United States was pre-notified briefly before the launch through nuclear risk reduction channels. For more, I'd refer you to state on that. And I think your third question was on our reaction to Putin's comments. I mean, we've seen this type of dangerous, reckless rhetoric before from President Putin. What we're focused on is continuing to support Ukraine with what it needs. Ukraine, as you know, has been successful in continuing to push back against Russian aggression. We just rolled out another $275 million package yesterday. You're going to see more packages continue in the weeks and months ahead left of this administration. So that's what we're really focused on. Of course, we're going to take seriously the rhetoric coming out of Russia, but our focus remains on arming Ukraine and supporting Ukraine what it needs.
The Pentagon's admission that it was informed beforehand but took no visible action to de-escalate raises even more questions. What is the Pentagon not revealing about the strike? Is the US allowing Ukraine to escalate the war? On Friday, NATO and Ukraine were still coming to terms with Russia's strike and Putin's admission of using experimental missile. According to reports, officials from Ukraine and NATO have decided to hold a meeting on Tuesday to discuss the Russian missile strike. The meeting will be held in Brussels and will take place on ambassadorial level. It was called by Kiev after the strike on the city of Dnipro, according to AFP. You see, ahead of negotiations promised by the incoming US President Donald Trump, both Russia and Ukraine seem to be jockeying for a position. Neither Ukraine nor Russia know what Trump will do when he takes office in January. But the escalations taking place right now could set a new status quo for the day he becomes president of the United States. As per reports, Ukrainian forces are focused on optimizing their battlefield position, which basically includes holding a portion of Russia's Kursk region. And this way, they can have a strong position before the new US administration comes in. In Washington, which is, of course, in the final months of Joe Biden's term, the mood is to arm Ukraine as much as possible. In fact, Biden has also given Ukraine authorization to use landmines and the right to send US military contractors in to fix the hardware, reportedly. But at what cost? You see, despite his tough words, Putin said that Russia remains open to talks with the missile launch. Putin has also warned NATO, do not test his patience. As for Ukraine, why did Ukraine prematurely, in a way, call it an ICBM? Was it truly a miscalculation? Or was it a strategic ploy to get more attention from NATO, possibly more aid, more weapons? You see, Ukraine's misrepresentation of facts, whether intentional or accidental, basically risks undermining its credibility with its allies. The West might start asking, is Ukraine trying to dictate the pace of escalation? And as for NATO, the stakes have never been higher. Every weapon they provide could be seen as an invitation for retaliation. The question really is, where does this end? And is this a tipping point in the Russia-Ukraine war? One that could spiral into a direct war between NATO and Russia. One that threatens to go global. We will, of course, be watching the developments very closely, and we will be asking the tough questions. And our next story is about the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He is hobbled by the ICC's arrest warrant against him. Netanyahu, of course, has rejected the ICC warrant, describing the move as anti-Semitic. And Netanyahu is not alone, by the way. ICC has issued arrest warrant against former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and the Hamas military commander Mohammad Deif. While Israel does not recognize the authority of the ICC and Netanyahu and Gallant will not turn themselves in, their world has just got a lot smaller. Let's break this down for you. The Rome Statute, the treaty that established the ICC, includes 124 countries across 6 continents. Under the statute, countries that are part of the ICC are legally bound to enforce its arrest warrants, which basically means that Netanyahu cannot travel to countries that recognize the ICC. Just have a look at this map on your screen now. The ones that are marked where Netanyahu could be arrested after the ICC's decision, there are 33 countries in Africa that recognize the criminal court in Hague. 20 countries in Asia Pacific are party to the Rome Statute. 42 countries from Europe are part of the treaty. 29 countries in Americas recognize the ICC. So as you can tell, US, Russia, China, India have not ratified the Rome Statute. But will the countries that do recognize the ICC enforce the arrest warrants is the question. Should Netanyahu travel there? There are signs they will. Let's start off with Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said Canada would abide by the rulings of international courts. He said, and I'm quoting here, it's really important that everyone abide by international law. Next, the UK. The spokesperson for the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said that Britain respects the independence of the ICC, but it did not confirm whether Britain would uphold the warrants. Next, South Africa. In a statement, the South African government welcomed the ICC decision and said that it marked a significant step towards justice for crimes against humanity and war crimes in Palestine. Remember, last year, South Africa took Israel to the International Court of Justice for committing, quote-unquote, genocide against Palestinians. The case is ongoing. Next up, France. In response to the ICC's arrest warrant, the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that the government would act in line with the ICC statutes, but declined to say whether France would arrest Netanyahu if he came to the country, saying that it was legally complex. Germany, for that matter, said it will carefully examine the ICC's arrest warrants but will not take further steps until a visit to the country. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell said that the ICC warrants were not political and should be respected and implemented. Meanwhile, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that he respects the work and independence of the ICC. Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine, called it a rare moment of euphoria. Now, how did Israel's primary backer, the United States, react? To put it simply, with anger. In a statement, US President Joe Biden called the ICC arrest warrants against the Israeli leaders outrageous. He said, and I'm quoting here, "Let me be clear once again, whatever the ICC might imply, there is no equivalence, none, between Israel and Hamas. We will always stand with Israel against threats to its security," quote unquote. The White House also expressed concern over the ICC prosecutors' alleged rush to seek arrest warrants and the troubling process errors that led to this decision, quote unquote. But US Senator Bernie Sanders supported the warrants, saying, and I'm quoting here, "all launched indiscriminate attacks against civilians and caused unimaginable human suffering. If the world does not uphold international law, we will descend into further barbarism," quote unquote. And in the ongoing West Asia conflict, an Israeli airstrike killed at least 20 people, including children, in a building housing displaced families in Gaza City. According to Gaza's health ministry, the death toll from Israel's military offensive since October 7 has reached 44,056, with over 104,000 injured.
This building has been hit 3 times, and every time people were massacred. Most of it was gone. Nobody was left. All of them are martyred today. A whole family has been wiped away. I swear to God, the whole family is wiped from the civil registry. Because of you, Israel. You killed civilians.
In Lebanon, Beirut residents are fearful of escalation as Israeli strikes continue to hit various locations.
About the negotiations, the Israelis are playing with us. The Israelis used to do this at the beginning in Gaza. Every day they come and say they want negotiations. They go to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Then they come back and reject the negotiations we have been working on.
Lebanon's Baalbek region was pounded by Israeli airstrikes on Thursday. Local authorities said 47 people have been killed, while 22 are injured. Strikes also shook Hezbollah-controlled areas in South Beirut and multiple southern villages. Lebanon's health ministry confirming the death toll from the conflict has surpassed 3,500 since October. Hezbollah has responded with rocket and drone attacks on Israel, including strikes on military assembly points and an airbase in Ashdod. Meanwhile, the US Senate has blocked 3 resolutions to halt arms sales to Israel, including the sales of tank rounds and guided bomb kits. Not just that, the White House has also rejected the ICC's decision to issue arrest warrants for Israeli leaders, including Benjamin Netanyahu. The press secretary confirmed the US is consulting with partners, including Israel, on the next steps.
Because this is the first time I've had an opportunity to speak to this at the podium. So let me just say more broadly that we fundamentally reject the court's decision to issue arrest warrants for senior Israel officials. We remain deeply concerned by the prosecutor's rush to seek arrest warrants and the troubling process errors that led to this decision. The United States has been clear that the ICC does not have jurisdiction over this matter.
Kenyan President William Ruto has cancelled 2 projects with the Adani Group valued around $2.6 billion over alleged corruption. This comes just hours after the billionaire founder of the Adani Group was accused by US authorities in a separate bribery scam. Kenya's largest airport and high-voltage electricity transmission lines were to be managed by companies owned by Gautam Adani, but Ruto reportedly demanded his ministers immediately cancel the ongoing procurement process with the Indian group firms. Ruto told lawmakers in a State of the Nation address in the capital, I'm quoting, "I have stated in the past and I reiterate today that in the face of undisputed evidence or credible information on corruption, I will not hesitate to take decisive action," quote unquote. He said the decision was based on new information provided by investigative agencies and partner nations.
I have directed agencies within the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Energy and Petroleum to immediately cancel the ongoing procurement process for JKI expansion public-private partnership transaction, as well as the recently concluded Ketrago transmission in public and immediately commence the process of onboarding alternative partners, because these are important projects.
Earlier, a subsidiary of the conglomerate Adani Group won a $736 million contract to build and run electricity lines in the East African country. And earlier this year, Adani Airport Holdings obtained a concession worth $1.85 billion reportedly to operate Nairobi's main airport for 30 years. Despite Ruto's prior endorsement of the transmission deal, public criticism of his government's opaque contract awarding surfaced. According to Kenyan MP John Kaguchia, the president was forced to back out of the deals following the US prosecution of Adani. WION is yet to receive a response for comment from the Adani Group. On Wednesday, US federal prosecutors said that Gautam Adani and others conspired to solicit funding from US investors while secretly planning to pay millions of dollars in bribes to Indian government officials in exchange for solar energy contracts. If there are ties to American investors or markets, federal prosecutors in the US can pursue corruption charges abroad. However, the Adani Group denied those charges. The group spokesperson said the allegations were baseless and that the conglomerate will take legal course of action. The serious bribery charges caused the stocks of Adani Group firms to crash, and gains for the year were wiped out as well. The wealth of the second wealthiest Asian billionaire fell by as much as $15 billion on Thursday. At market close, his fortune was around $72 billion. That is down from $84.3 billion at the end of 2023 and a peak of $122 billion on June 3rd. The US charge is the latest twist in the almost 2-year roller coaster ride. The businessman has had a rough ride since January 2023 when Hindenburg Research published a scathing report. The US short seller accused him of fraud and corporate governance flaws. The latest indictment threatens to throw the Adani Group into turmoil. The group has been the subject of an ongoing inquiry by India's securities regulator, which started last year. The SEBI issued show-cause notices to 4 Adani firms in the September quarter, and the group's response is awaited. Along with the US bribery charge indictment order, court documents of an arrest warrant against Gautam Adani were unsealed to disclose them to international law enforcement authorities. An indictment marks the start of legal proceedings and not a declaration of guilt. Following the billionaire industrialist's indictment on allegations of fraud and bribery, a warrant for his arrest was unsealed last month in a New York court. The court document states Judge Robert Levy ordered its unsealing on October 31, 2024. Foreign law enforcement authorities were given access to the unsealed indictment and arrest warrant. The United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York filed a motion to have the warrant unsealed. So, what is an indictment? An indictment basically marks the start of legal proceedings and not a declaration of guilt. A grand jury formally charges someone with a crime by issuing an indictment. This does not prove guilt, but it shows sufficient evidence exists to press charges. A grand jury heard the prosecution's case and reached a verdict that warranted the filing of charges against Gautam Adani for several violations of US federal law. The indictment contains crucial legal aspects such as the specific offences against Adani are laid forth in the detailed charges, summaries of the evidence that supports the charges, what US laws were allegedly broken, and following the filing of an indictment, the prosecutor requests that the court issue an arrest warrant. Arrest warrants are not issued by US courts unless there is a belief that the accused would willingly show up in the court. Instead of a warrant, the court may send summons to the defendant if they are considered cooperative. The court may opt to issue summons instead of a warrant if it determines that Adani is complying or is not likely to escape. Adani's legal team could try to get this option negotiated. The accused's whereabouts determine the arrest procedure. Things get trickier when the defendant is outside of the US. The US authorities then have two options, basically. Either they utilize diplomatic channels to commence extradition proceedings, which would need assistance from the Indian government under the US-India extradition treaty, or they could request an Interpol red notice, which would notify the law enforcement globally. To avoid any potential leaks, it is common practice to first seal indictments involving foreign persons like Adani. The United States' ability to prosecute Adani hinges on his extradition. US courts can only hear cases involving crimes committed within the country or against US residents. Both the United States and India must recognize the alleged crime as illegal for extradition to proceed. Beyond that, the United States needs to provide the Indian government with enough proof. And after that, the Indian government would look at the request through the lens of Indian law and the treaty's provisions. And finally, Indian courts may be asked to hold hearings to determine if the evidence warrants extradition. Following his arrest or voluntary appearance, Adani would be then taken through the official court procedure of arraignment, during which the accusations against him are read out, and he is asked to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. At trial, if the case goes forward, the prosecution will have the burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. For example, if the accusations are political, there are human rights concerns, or there isn't enough proof, extradition might be prohibited. In response to the indictment and media reports on the charges, Adani Group denied the allegations and called them baseless in a mandatory stock exchange filing. The statement also said, I'm quoting, "There are no allegations made against the company." Shifting focus for now to Japan, where people are protesting outside the Tokyo-based Japan-US Security Consultative Committee. They are basically demanding action by the Japanese government and the US military to solve the pollution problem associated with the US military bases in the country. Protesters basically said that water bodies near the US military bases in Japan are exposed to an excessive amount of compounds that are carcinogenic chemicals, and they also say that blood tests of the residents living nearby have been abnormal. Despite this, the pollution problem has not been solved for many years, according to them. Listen in.
The place where I live is apparently affected by water pollution at the US Yokota Air Base. Concerns about PFAS continue to increase. In places including Okinawa, Japanese government uses taxes to pay for pollution treatment. This approach is unacceptable. As I have just said, the waste from the US military should be handled at their expense. This is the request that I want to make.
As per the demonstrators, due to the existence of US-Japan Status of Forces Agreement, it's difficult for the Japanese government to enter US military bases in Japan to conduct investigations, resulting in the delay in solving the problem of the PFAS pollution.
We are now very concerned about the problem of PFAS pollution. The US military stationed in Japan has extraterritoriality. We have no way of knowing exactly what was transported into the US military bases in Japan. We don't even know whether they brought weapons of mass destruction or drugs into the bases, nor who entered these bases.
Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, two of the world's wealthiest individuals, have reignited their rivalry. This time over the upcoming US presidential election. Musk has claimed that Bezos had urged investors to sell their stocks, including those in Tesla and SpaceX, predicting negative outcomes for Donald Trump's chances in the election. Musk's statement made on the platform X referred to a conversation that he allegedly overheard at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, where he has been increasingly involved. However, Bezos quickly denied the accusation, stating on X, I'm quoting, "Nope, 100% not true." The dispute between Musk and Bezos is set against the backdrop of their businesses, which compete in industries like space exploration, electric vehicles, artificial intelligence. As of the latest Bloomberg Billionaires Index, Musk's wealth standing at $331 billion, while Bezos follows at $226 billion. In fact, Tesla's stock has seen a 44% increase between early November and mid-November, which Musk ties to investor optimism about Trump's political comeback. This latest clash adds to a long history of tensions between the two billionaires, including previous disputes over NASA contracts and their space ventures. Musk has previously labeled Bezos a copycat and criticized Amazon's market dominance. Meanwhile, Bezos has voiced skepticism about Musk's vision for Mars colonization and expressed concern about how Musk's ownership of X might impact Tesla's global operations as both men continue to dominate the tech and space sectors. Their personal rivalries remain closely tied to their business interests. On to some news from Abu Dhabi. Remember Bab's Hindu Mandir, Abu Dhabi's first Hindu stone temple? 9 months after Prime Minister Modi inaugurated the temple in Abu Dhabi, the Bab's Hindu Mandir is making headlines. It has been named the best cultural project across MENA or Middle East North Africa of 2024. Not just that, Bab's temple has also been honored with the best cultural project in the UAE. The Bab's Hindu Mandir was recognized because of its standout architecture, cultural significance, as well as its contribution to the society. More specifically, the temple was lauded for its engineering ingenuity, innovation, and sustainability. The awards, which are recognized as a gold standard for excellence in the MENA region, conferred the title on the temple. That's huge, especially when the awards received over 40 nominations across various categories. Accepting the recognition, the head of the Bab's Hindu Mandir, Pujya Brahma Vihari Swami, spoke from India and highlighted why the project was significant. He said that these awards underscore the unity and harmony it symbolizes. Besides the technical and agricultural brilliance of the temple, just for some background here, the Bab's Hindu Mandir was first inaugurated on February 14, 2024. It is reportedly the first Hindu temple in the West, the first Hindu temple in West Asia to be built using traditional Indian techniques. The temple incorporates over 30,000 intricately carved stone pieces, a testament to its design and craftsmanship. It is built according to ancient Hindu Shilpa Shastras, ancient texts that describe design and principles for a wide range of arts and crafts. The temple is also a rare mix between traditional Indian artistry and Arabic motifs. It stands as a symbol of cross-cultural harmony. And what's more, it's also the region's biggest temple and the largest Hindu temple in the whole of West Asia. It can accommodate between 8,000 to 10,000 people. As for how this temple adds to the ties between India and the UAE, you see at the very outset, the project's advancement was closely overseen by the leadership of both India and the UAE. Several ministers, in fact, frequented the site to provide support to the temple's foundation. In fact, just a few days back, India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, also paid a visit. He had called it a true symbol of India and UAE friendship, peace, harmony, and goodwill around the world. At the time of its inauguration, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had thanked the President of the UAE for gifting the piece of land where the temple now stands. Prime Minister Modi had hailed the temple for fostering stronger ties between India and the other side. Delhi is facing an unprecedented environmental catastrophe. As toxic smog continues to engulf the city, it has become an annual affair, unfortunately. New data reveals a shocking statistic. 5 trees are being felled every hour in the city, even as residents struggle to breathe in what has essentially become a massive gas chamber all over again. Our next report, taking a closer look at this crisis.
Delhi is choking. Toxic smog has turned the city into a gas chamber. Grey skies and noxious air have paralyzed life. Residents struggle to breathe as pollution levels soar to hazardous levels. This is what the city looks like, a haze blanketing Delhi, bringing life to a standstill and exposing the grim reality of inaction. While emergency measures like halting construction and vehicular restrictions are in place, they are mere band-aids on a gaping wound.
Everyone has a sore throat and fever because of this pollution, and the government should ban crop residue burning. All this is smoke, it's not fog. It's just smoke everywhere. The government should stop crop burning.
The noxious haze has rendered visibility so poor that flights are disrupted, roads are treacherous, and daily life is paralyzed. Residents report burning eyes, sore throats, and breathing difficulties. Schools have shifted online, and odd-even vehicle restrictions attempt to reduce emissions. But the impact remains minimal.
The main contributor for this period is agriculture residue burning and vehicular emission. This agriculture residue burning is really it's an episodic thing, because after harvesting, the farmers try to clean up their farms very fast, and they find out the very easy way to burn it. Of course, since last few years, there's a major attempt to stop it, but still it's going on.
Now, in a startling revelation, 5 trees are chopped every hour in Delhi. This is according to data submitted to the Delhi High Court. Despite the National Forest Policy's mandate of maintaining 33% green cover, Delhi struggles with a dismal 23%. The India State of Forest Report 2021 highlights this alarming gap, showing the city's green cover far below the required threshold. Winter smog, a toxic blend of cold air, dust, industrial emissions, and smoke from illegal farm fires, returns annually, killing thousands prematurely and severely affecting children and the elderly.
Because of pollution, cases of infections are increasing, especially in children who are suffering from fever and cold. Since pollution won't go away, infections will keep spreading, and we are more safe in our homes.
Politicians continue to squabble over responsibility, worsening the crisis. With over 30 million people at risk, Delhi's plight underscores the urgent need for long-term policies, stringent enforcement, and reforestation to combat this growing catastrophe. The clock is ticking. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
On to some news from Alabama. A man convicted in the 1994 killing of a hitchhiker has been put to death, and it was done so using nitrogen gas. But this is not the first time such a method has been used, as this was the country's third execution using nitrogen gas. On Thursday evening, Carrie Dale Grayson was executed at the William C. Holman Correctional Facility in southern Alabama. Who is Grayson? He was sentenced to death over the 1994 torture, bludgeoning and mutilation of Vicky Lynn, a hitchhiker who was traveling to her mother's home in Louisiana. The mutilated body was found with 180 stab wounds, one of her lungs removed, her fingers and thumbs cut off. 30 years later, Grayson was executed after being convicted of the murder. Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall said in a statement, I'm quoting, "Tonight justice has been served." Just this year, Alabama has executed 3 death row inmates using nitrogen gas. While Alabama officials have described the use of nitrogen asphyxiation as the most painless and humane method of execution, critics don't quite agree. They have in fact likened the practice to torture. In fact, on Thursday, a group of United Nations experts called for a ban on execution by nitrogen gas. They said it violates international law. The Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has said, and I'm quoting, "We emphasize that the prohibition on torture or to cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment is absolute, never acceptable and not dependent on alternatives," quote unquote. 21 out of 50 states have sanctioned death penalty. Of these, only Alabama, Mississippi and Oklahoma have allowed the use of nitrogen to execute people. So far this year, US authorities have executed 22 people. Shifting focus, a former senior official in China's financial sector is facing allegations of bribery involving cryptocurrency. This marks China's first corruption case tied to digital assets. Yao Qian, once a key figure in China's Securities Regulatory Commission, is reportedly accused of exploiting his position to accept bribes and misuse his regulatory powers. According to China's Central Commission for Discipline Inspection, Yao used virtual currencies to facilitate illegal exchanges of money and influence. During his tenure at the Securities Regulatory Commission, Yao's department oversaw critical areas like data security and regulations for securities, futures and funds. Authorities allege he prioritized personal gain over professional duties by favoring certain technology companies to help them expand in exchange for financial benefits. The benefits included covering his personal expenses and accepting large sums of money. As part of the crackdown, Yao has been expelled from the Communist Party, stripped of his public office, and reportedly has all his illegal earnings confiscated. Authorities are now investigating whether to pursue formal criminal charges against Yao. The case comes amid China's intensified efforts to combat corruption, particularly in high-stakes industries like finance and technology. While cryptocurrencies are widely embraced in countries like the US, they remain a legal gray area in China, where courts are divided on formally recognizing virtual assets. A church in Switzerland is enabling visitors reportedly to interact with a digital avatar of Jesus, also known as AI Jesus, as per reports, through an innovative installation. Let's break this down for you. According to reports, St. Peter's Chapel in Switzerland has installed this so-called brand new AI Jesus in what is being dubbed as a breakthrough in generative AI. Scientists and theologians of Lucerne University have teamed up to create a holographic Jesus powered by AI. And what's more, the AI Jesus reportedly talks back and offers advice. The installation was first launched in August, in which visitors can also ask questions about faith, and the AI responds based on training from the New Testament as well as other religious texts. This is reportedly part of an art project which translates to God in a machine. But how does that even work? You see, worshippers basically need to sit in front of a screen and ask their questions aloud, and the face on the screen reacts to words. And guess what? All of this is not really pre-programmed, which makes AI Jesus look and sound as real as possible. What's more, it's not just limited to one language. The AI Jesus, it seems, has mastered different tongues and chat in as many as 100 languages. There is a saying that cats have 9 lives. The average lifespan of a cat is around 13 to 20 years. But one unfortunate feline, roughly around 32,000 years ago, lost its life when it was just 3 weeks old, only to reappear in the world in 2020. In a study published on Thursday, scientists shared their findings on a frozen, mummified, saber-toothed cub was discovered in 2020 in the Republic of Sakha in eastern Russia, a region where temperature can be as low as minus 90 degrees Celsius. The cub's head was down to its chest and its front arms and paws were encased in a piece of ice when it was found. Interestingly, the fur of this 32,000-year-old mummified cat is still intact. The saber-toothed cat cub is almost small enough to hold in one hand, but its discovery after 32,000 years is a momentous event, definitely, for paleontologists. Scientists from the Academy of Sciences in Yakutia in the Far East say that it is a unique find.
This
is really a global sensation in paleontology, because before this discovery, it was believed that Homotherium disappeared in the Middle Pleistocene about 300,000 years ago. And here we have found a cub and determined the age of 32,000 years. That is, it was just not so long ago. And it is a mummy. You see, this is a frozen cub mummy. Skeletons, single bones, skulls have always been found. There are areas where there are a lot of them, skeletons of the same Homotherium. Only we have found the frozen mummy. And I suspect that this is probably the only one we will see for a long time, this mummy. This is a real sensation.
Rising global temperatures caused by climate change are melting much of Russia's permafrost, revealing animal remains and other ancient traces. Early this year, scientists at the Yakutsk Institute were able to study a 44,000-year-old wolf carcass pulled from the melted tundra.